We are live in the tree lounge. All right.
Yeah.
Here it is. The video is live. So this is the tree lounge live with Dr. Ken Miller. Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Hi. It's great. It's great to see you. I am doing this interview series in lieu of being able to get together live on October 3rd. We were going to have a big party and celebration for Trees Foundation's 30th anniversary, as you know.
Yeah.
And one of the people we wanted to celebrate in particular is you as a grassroots steward, and your long career supporting grassroots efforts, environmental and social causes. And we are going to do that when it is safer to gather.
Great.
So there was a lot of discussion about that, about whether it was safe enough to gather outside on October 3rd. And there was a lot of discussion. And in the end, we decided, like so many organizations planning events, to postpone until another time because of the spike in COVID cases. So you being a doctor for many, many years, you're retired now, of course, but you graduated medical school in 1971.
Right.
So just wanted to start and give you an opportunity to talk about the COVID pandemic that we're in right now and just how you feel about it and how you're adjusting to it and what you think about how we're going to get through this thing.
Well, I hope with vaccinations, that's probably the only way. And, you know, the adjustment has been like everyone else. I have my small little group, you know, Greg King and Joanne, Howard and Remedy, Joyce King, and that's about it. So I don't go anywhere and, you know, do a lot of reading.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's like, okay, it's Friday. What's that?
It's not all bad. You know, I especially like the slowdown that happened initially. Mm-hmm. It seemed like a lot of the, you know, commercial enterprises and all that kind of stuff that surrounds us slowed way down, which was really nice to feel and see.
I would agree in some ways that, especially in the beginning of the quarantining and the sheltering in place, I got to realize how busy I was making myself, sometimes unnecessarily, like maybe too busy. But it's good sometimes to slow down and be more intentional about your trips to town and intentional about what are really important gatherings to go to rather than stay home and take care of home.
Yeah. It's a lot of lessons in this pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are live, and I see there are a few people joining us live. Please feel free to say hello in the comments. We want this to be interactive, though I'm still getting used to doing that. So please write a comment. I'll try to see it and read it. We're streaming also to YouTube, so that people can see it on YouTube as well.
Wow.
And we want to talk today about, like, take a little bit of a trip down memory lane with you, Ken, and some of the activism you did back in the 70s. And up until today, you were also in working in an emergency room. So most people would say that that's enough to do and feel proud at the end of the day. And yet you had all these other environmental organizing activities you were doing. So could you kind of give us a little bit of that background of what your day-to-day life was like in when you were working as an emergency physician in the East Bay and also getting involved in organizing against nuclear weapons?
Yeah, well, you kind of summed it up. I mean, I was in a East Bay Trauma Center, part of a emergency medical group, and I got involved with the UC Nuclear Weapons Lab Conversion Project, which I used to be able to say really fast. And what we did is we actually did the very first rally out at Livermore. I don't know if you know about Livermore. It's run by the University of California, and it's one of the two nuclear weapons labs. The other one is Los Alamos. It's run by the University of California. Oops. Oh, whoops.
That's okay. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah. So yeah, we did the first rally out there. It was a big rally. And then we did a big teach-in at UC Berkeley. And Dan Ellsberg was part of our little group. We had about 10 of us who put it on. And it was quite successful. And our goal was to get some kind of an exhibit they have a museum there. So you can go and admire nuclear weapons in all of their various forms and sort of how they came about. And, because Glenn Seaborg was at UC Berkeley, he discovered plutonium. And, Dr. Strangelove was there and all these big, nuclear people. Glenn Seaborg, by the way, was a very, very wonderful man. He didn't really like nuclear weapons. But, Oppenheimer and all the famous people were involved. And so our job was, or our goal was to get an exhibit, something that showed the other side. And we did manage to get a little corner eventually that showed, the destruction and the possibility of nuclear winter and the connection between nuclear weapons and nuclear power. And we got the city of Berkeley to be a no nuclear zone, and Highway 80 to be a no nuclear highway through, wow. Little things. But yeah, it was fascinating. I learned a lot, but realized after a while that this was way too big for little old me. Not that Redwood, fighting for the forest it's not a small thing. But then I learned about Redwood Summer, and I thought, wow, gee, this is something we could actually win. I've been naive all my life. So hence, that's why I'm an environmental activist, because you have to be really naive. You have to think you can win and you think you can make a difference. So I, came up here in Redwood Summer. I had been here in 1975. I worked in Hoopa. So I came from Canada to Hoopa when I was allowed back in the country after 5 years in Canada. And I worked in Hoopa in the emergency room, and we had a hospital and a clinic. So I fell in love with Humboldt County at that point. And then
you went to the East Bay.
Then I went to the area.
So tell us what brought you to Canada for your, right, was it after medical school you went to Canada for a while?
Yeah, once graduating from medical school, I figured when I entered medical school, which was in 1967, that the Vietnam War would be over by the time I got out. And I was wrong. So shocking. But it wasn't over, and so I left at night. I just.
So you could have been drafted as a doctor.
Well, yeah, the way it worked was that you were committed once you did your internship. They grabbed you, and I was grabbable. So I went and did my residency in Montreal at McGill Hospitals in internal medicine. I took a year off and I traveled in Africa for a year just to get away from white society. I just wanted to see something different, which is also why I went to Hoopa, incidentally. Hoopa, the tribe had advertised in the New England Journal of Medicine. They advertised for a doctor. And I looked at the map once. I think it was Gerald Ford who gave us amnesty in exchange for Nixon getting amnesty. So I think there were 10,000 of us in Canada. There were probably 100,000. But anyway, I looked at a map and I saw this incredible place, the Trinity River and the Klamath River. And said, oh, wow, I want to see this place. So I came out here, and I also wanted to see what it was like to be working with Indians, and are they, what are they like? And, how are they different from us, and all that kind of stuff. So I had a good time working there. We had a hospital there at that time. It was part of General Hospital, which closed down. But we had a full-fledged hospital with, I think, maybe 8 beds or 12 beds. It was really cute. And a clinic that Dr. Rickliff started out there by going on, I think it was a show like Jeopardy. And he raised money to start this clinic in Hoopa. And I lived in Hoopa, it was great. And when I went to the Bay Area, I always wanted to come back to Humboldt County. It was so gorgeous, and I loved it. I didn't know anything at the time. I don't know a lot now, but I knew less then about what was going on, because I was pretty isolated in Hoopa. I hardly ever left. And so then I came back up when I saw the Redwood Summer and participated in some of that, and then got all inspired. So what inspired me also was that I realized that there wasn't a lot of local organizing in the watersheds of affected residents. EPIC was doing great things, but a lot of it, litigation and on a big level. But so we started, when I was in the Bay Area, we started the Bay Area Coalition for Headwaters with Karen Pickett and Karen Rossman.
I'm getting some kind of echo. So I'm going to work on that, but please keep telling us about your history.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't know any of the actors involved in all this. I'd never met Greg King or Daryl or any of these people, and it was right after the bombing. And so we put on a show at the Lawrence Hall of Science with Doug Thron and Greg King and Cecilia Landman. And I'm blocking his name now. I think I gave you his name. The great forester, the one who said, what a surprise it is to be loved. He was a wonderful man. Sharon Duggan edited his book. So it was really a great event. And that's when I met sort of a lot of the people involved from EPIC and, involved in the Headwaters struggle. Kind of conceived of the idea of Watershed Council.
Right. So were you, let's see, do I still have an echo?
I'm not hearing one.
Do you hear? Oh, good. So you moved up to the Bay Area. You were in the Bay Area. You started Bay Area Coalition for the Headwaters. You were also having a lot of parties at your Richmond house. I heard through the grapevine that where a lot of people were having a great time. So you've always been a connector of people. And I think that must just be your personality, that like after you get out of your day job at the ER, you want to get together with interesting people and sort of bring people together that actually wound up organizing a lot of things together. So I think that you've brought a lot of people together and created a lot of groups over the years that have done amazing things.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I created them or not, but I was part of it. In the radio program last night when Daryl said, he was singing the song about let's go into the forest and hang out with friends.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of it. It's really a lot of it was to hang out with friends.
And Alicia Littletree was on that show saying it's time to do that again. They're doing that in Jackson Demonstration State Forest, saying, look, this is not being managed in a good way that's fire safe. And the foresters that are part of what's called CAL FIRE now, but is really the Department of Forestry, renamed to CAL FIRE as a marketing campaign, because who can complain about the firefighters? And as Daryl was saying on that show on KMUD last night, which if anybody is listening to this, it's on the KMUD archives, 5 to 6 last night, which was September 16th. You can find it on the KMUD archives. It was a really great show.
Yeah.
And talking about the museum exhibit that's starting tomorrow in Willits, that's the 30th anniversary of the 1990 car bombing, with the bombed car that Judy and Daryl were in, is the big exhibit. Plus there's all kinds of other curated materials about Judy Berry, and it's going to be a really interesting opportunity for the panel speaker program that they have is going to be live streamed, and that'll be another good opportunity to talk about the past, but also how it's relevant today. And it's also a good time today when it's safer to gather, or when we're outside with masks, to get together in the forests and protect the forest. So you really kind of met a lot of lifetime friends during Redwood Summer yourself, it seems like. And is that what brought you to move from the Bay Area to Humboldt County?
Yeah, eventually. What got me here mostly was wanting to do watershed organizing.
Yeah.
Of people who were actually affected. I thought that would be a very effective way to fight Maxam. And, you know, we were modestly successful in certain ways. We did a lot. I hooked up with Bob Martel. I wrote letters to various people about doing this. And Bob is the one who showed up. We met in Hopland. That's when, what was that beer? I can't remember. Anyway, it was in the brewery was there. And
was it Earth Thirst or something?
No. It's still been
the Hopland Brewery. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, we decided to do it, and I came up here and hooked up with Richard Ginger and Jesse Noel and Ellen Fred. You know, I told you earlier that I had met Ellen when Daryl put on a show, a New Year's Eve show at the, what's the name of that theater again?
The Fillmore?
The Fillmore, yeah. So we did a New Year's Eve thing, and Ellen Fred was there. And so we met, and, you know, we figured out how to do this. And I came up here I guess I finally made it up here in 97. And I actually bought a house, I think it was July 17th, as I recall. We all moved in. And at that day, we put on a show for the Board of Supervisors. We actually got an afternoon with them. And, this was not a friendly board. It never has been, although now we have the potential for one to be. And I remember holding up a bag of silt. I think it was Josh Kaufman that held up a bag of silt to show them what we were getting out of all this deal. And we tried to show them the financial ramifications of what Maxam was doing and all this kind of stuff. And it fell, on deaf ears. The supervisors sat back and did absolutely nothing. I remember John Woolley saying, well, we can't stop all harvesting, as if. But we had a great time. We published a newspaper, came out once a month, and everybody read it because we reported on all the details, all the agency, this and that. And we made fun of, everybody. And it was really good. And actually, we hooked up with the Regional Water Board at that time. We had a very progressive and cooperative team there, Ranjit Gill and his team, and they agreed with us, and they would talk to us on the side. And we actually got a moratorium in freshwater and elk. The only time they ever, who ever heard of a moratorium in a watershed? And we actually got a 2-year, I think it was 2 years, in Elk River. And that leads me to Salmon Forever. Jesse Noel, who started Salmon Forever, he just blind called me one day when I was still in the Bay Area, and he said, basically, will you join the board? Will you fund us? And of course I said yes. And so Jesse was part of our team that lived here. And it was very exciting because what Jesse discovered and what he did, nobody really knows, but what he did was water quality monitoring. He figured out, because salmon are visual feeders, he figured out that if you can measure turbidity before and after cutting, before and after storms and all that kind of stuff, that we can make a difference. Again, there's a lot of naivete about this, but it was really fun to do. We had very makeshift tools to do it. And Jesse would get up in the middle of the night during storms and go out and he would monitor like 10 different streams all the way down to Soham from McKinleyville. Yeah, it was really astounding. And we collected tons of data. And we finally got EPA approval for our methods and set up a laboratory and the whole bit. And, we really thought we could make a difference. And, it brings me to Jackson State. Like, do they really need to do the experiments? All these experiments again and again. Well, does clear cutting really, is that any different from selection? Well, not the way you guys do it, actually, if you want to know the truth, but these ongoing experiments they do that eventually eradicate the forest that they're experimenting on. That's the whole idea. So we didn't know that. We figured that if we provided data and could show, stuff. The other thing we did was the Stafford Slide happened on January 1st of 97. Big storm, huge storm. Stafford Slide happens, big slide. Thank God nobody died. It was because one of the neighbors saw the trees moving up on the hill and got the people out. Wow. And it was a big deal.
And it took out houses?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The slide hit the house right after the people got out. It's a big slide. Yeah, huge. Yeah. And the reason that there was a slide is because Maxim was going after every tree they could get. So much so that even CDF, I remember Ernie Roll, during deposition said, I started packing a gun because I was so intimidated out there by those loggers because they were going after every tree. And they went after too many at the top of Stafford, and that's why it slid. We made a video called Voices of Humboldt County, The Cumulative Impact, which is a really good video, still is, where we covered a lot of the science and a lot of the politics and a lot of what was going on. And then we called our newspaper Voices of Humboldt County. Mm-hmm. So there's a little kind of a quickie.
Well, I bet those newspapers are archived somewhere too. I wonder if that's part of Humboldt history that hopefully will be preserved.
Yeah, they are. I had five or six filing cabinets full of documents. They're all at HSU, and all the newspapers are there, and they're also at Stanford. All the
great.
Plus the video is at Stanford. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's part of the history. Very few people know. I mean, I think if you ask most people today in Humboldt about Maxam, in fact, I called in when the mayor's race for Fortuna was happening some time ago, or one of the races, maybe it was, I think it was mayor's race or supervisor, whatever. There were 5 of them running, and I called in and I asked, what they thought of, Maxam and John Campbell, who was mayor and all that. And none of them seem to know. And, history gets lost really quickly, which is, very detrimental to the future, as has been pointed out numerous times.
Right. Yeah. So it's good to revisit the history and have it available to inspire people. And like Alicia was saying on the radio show last night, when you go to the Willits Museum or check it out online, bring your notebook and take notes, because the kind of actions and the activity that was going on back in 1990 is really needed to resurface today in a lot of situations, especially Jackson State.
Well, we need a museum here about what happened, because it's still going on. When Maxam left, they not only left a devastating legacy of decimated watersheds, they left a legacy of a cut harvest that was 176 million board feet a year, part of the Headwaters deal. That's a lot of cut. The national forest is like 25 million. So it's huge, especially since there were no trees left. So it's, and, herbicides were never used earlier and they started to be used again. And, the history really needs to be known. People need to understand.
Yeah. I mean, let's I don't think we're going to get, I think we're going to need another interview to get to everything that you've done over your career as an activist and organizer. But let's talk about some stuff that's been going on more recently. I mean, you retired from emergency medicine in 1999, and then you got into medical marijuana.
Right.
So that was probably a lot more laid back. Can I guess?
Yeah. A lot more laid back. Yeah. A lot more.
So you did that from 2001 to 2015, and then you retired.
Well, then they legalized it, and then the catastrophe started happening. But I did it till they legalized it. But I used to go to, I had an office in Arcata and an office in Crescent City, and I would travel to all of the outlying areas through 4 counties because I didn't want people coming to see me in Arcata driving the rigs in from, from Happy Camp and Hyam Palm and et cetera. So I would go out there twice a year and see everybody, make them legal, the
215 recommendations, right?
Exactly.
Prop 215. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, that must have been a change of pace from being an ER doctor for sure. And did that allow you a bit more freedom to do more organizing too? I mean, I know you worked a lot with Salmon Forever, and you've also been advocating for solar power, more solar power. Has that been more?
Don't forget, we got the DA to sue Maxam.
Oh,
yeah,
right. The DA. Gallegos. Yes,
Gallegos. So that was during that time too. So we provided the facts. In fact, I did. Jesse and me and Bill Bertain, and I helped write the lawsuit that was against PL, and the shit really hit the fan. Maxam funded a recall of Paul, and it was very interesting. We had them by rights. They lied in their HCP, and they tried to fool everybody, and we caught them. We knew we had them, but because of the legal system, there's this thing called the right to lie. Exactly. I mean, people wonder about that. Yeah, it's
the right to lie.
Yeah, it stems from a case around 1900 or so, around the turn of the century. It was a railroad case called Knorr-Pennington. 2 cases, Knorr-Pennington. Knorr is one and Pennington's another. The whole idea is that if you're applying for a permit or lobbying the government, whatever, you have a right to lie. It's under the freedom of speech. And what the theory is, that because the agencies know that, they are obligated to ferret out lies. In other words, they won't just take your word for it. So
Maxam was lying, and you caught them lying on their reports to agencies?
Well, what happened was they were doing the HCP. They were doing watershed analysis. And so what they were trying to say is that our mass wasting mitigation will prevent landslides. And what they did is they used Bear Creek as their example. And so Leslie Reed reviewed it under she was asked by George Miller, because Sharon Duggan got to George Miller, and he was the congressman from Contra Costa. Sharon asked George to ask Leslie, who was at, Dr. Reed was at the Redwood Sciences Lab. And she did a magnificent review, a scathing review of their HCP, right? And she pointed out that their mass wasting mitigations would not prevent mass wasting. Gee, you didn't have to be the kind of geologist she is to get that, but she is a geomorphologist. So what they did is they went next door to Jordan Creek. Now, Jordan Creek is a really small watershed. And they said, gee, we looked at Jordan Creek and it's, we found very different results. Well, we knew that was bullshit. They scammed Pacific Watershed Associates PWA had no idea what was happening. A bunch of rubes. Maxam had them, just befuddled. And so they lied with the Jordan Creek. We call it the Jordan Creek scam. But they knew that they had to turn in the real Jordan Creek results before the end of the whole thing. So the way they did it is they turned it into CDF. I can't remember the guy's name. He just put it in a drawer, so nobody saw it, but it got turned in. Well, we knew all that. And the reason we knew that was because Dr. Reed was going down every day to CDF. She wanted to see the results, and she could never see it. They would never let her see it until it was too late. And when Richard Wilson, who was the head of, the forestry thing, when he found out about it, he was willing to testify. The issue was on March 1st, 1999, was the Headwaters deal going to go through or not? And it went through by one vote at the state legislature. And had Richard Wilson seen that, he says that he would have required it to be recirculated, the EIR and the EIS. And had that happened, the whole thing would have fallen apart, which would have been good. But in the end, we didn't get it. And then we turned all this evidence over to Gallegos, and Gallegos said, yeah, this is unfair business practices. And so he sued, and he wrote a great suit. I went all the way through the appellate court, and we lost because they have a right to lie.
Wow. What a difficult.
And you see that now, if you read any THP, it's just a bunch of lies. Mm-hmm. All of them. There's not one that is legitimate. They all say it's not going to do any damage.
So what's the point in terms of it's a broken system at its core, is what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
The THPs, you can say whatever you want, and there's no repercussions, and that's just not right. So
it's not only a broken system, it's kind of a closed loop. There's no way in. There's no way, you go to CDF, you go to, it's like being put on permahold. You're just in this loop. You go back and forth. It's like if you appeal to the regional water board, they'll send you to the state water board, which will send you back to the regional water board. And we learned all this the hard way because we went back and forth. We went to the Board of Forestry once and, gave them a lecture on tobacco science and how the cigarette industry, showed that they were okay. It's the same thing with the timber industry. It's a travesty, as everybody knows. I'm not saying anything nobody knows.
Well, so looking back now, what thoughts do you have in terms of you continue to be a great supporter of grassroots causes, social causes, and environmental causes, and Trees Foundation is very happy to partner with you and your Pelican Fund. And the Pelican Fund, every year, you very intentionally pick out many groups that you send donations to through our donor advised fund. And I think that's just a great example of how you really care about the grassroots, that you really think it's important to support all these different efforts of resistance, you could
Right.
say.
Right.
And, you know, what are your thoughts today, looking back on all the work you've done and all the efforts? It sounds like you're feeling like you were naive in some ways, but in other ways, a lot of cool things happened, and there were successes. You know, it's just,
Yeah.
it's still a system that we struggle with today. So what would you say to environmentalists today that are, you know, coming in and wanting to stop the climate catastrophe?
Yeah.
What's your advice?
Well, you know, we just beat Terrigen. And this is a great example of sort of cognitive dissonance where climate activists ignore the habitat consequences of producing green energy, or so-called green energy. And so I think that was a big lesson for all of us, that we have to really pay attention to habitat. And that's what local grassroots activists do. And, you know, I look to the younger people and hope that they get involved and learn from the mentors. You know, Michael Evanson and Ellen Taylor, all the Martel people, Steve Madrone, our great supervisor, Richard Ginger, Daryl, Greg King. You know, really tap into their experience and their knowledge. Jesse Noel is still very active and knows a lot, tons of stuff. And I think one of the things it boils down to is we have to get people in elected positions who can actually make a difference. We have a chance now with the Board of Supervisors to maybe have a semi-progressive board, you know, with Natalie Arroyo. She's probably pretty progressive, and Mike Wilson and Madrone. That's 3, and they can do a lot. You know, the elected people do a lot. So voting really counts, and sort of campaigning, working at all levels, you know, wherever you find your interest and your excitement and your fellow travelers, be active. And do what Daryl said, hang out with your friends who are active, and do what you can.
Right. Yeah. Last night, I think it was, he was saying, you know, but direct action in the forest is an opportunity to hang out with other people that are aligned with you and your love for the forest and protecting it. And it's an opportunity to hang out with friends and make a difference.
You know, when people look around today, there are some huge issues facing Humboldt County. You know, Richardson Grove, when it opens up, you know, you're going to get all this big truck traffic. They're going to industrialize the port to do offshore wind instead of putting solar panels on every roof. You know, they can't wait to put it in some centralized habitat where they can sell you power instead of putting the power in your hands and democratizing our energy wealth. They want to run a water pipeline up to Trinidad and develop all the way to Big Lagoon. I mean, that's a lot of things to look at and a lot of things we need to pay attention to, in addition to our forests and our watersheds, you know, our salmon particularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, right now, especially with the drought, it's a tough time for salmon. So we're just hoping for more rain this winter, and might even get some rain tomorrow. So that would be amazing.
Yeah.
One thing you had in your notes here, your bio, was starting in 1976, you started studying existential self-inquiry with John Lonsbury in Berkeley, and that you continue that today. So I think that's really interesting, because that's you know, that's going back 45 years of this inquiry you've had that you say is now ongoing, focusing on what is missing from our species that leads to our current calamities and what we must do. So let's take a few minutes to get more under the psychological thinking of Dr. Ken Miller here. Tell us more about this inquiry.
Well, there's sort of this fundamental problem that you can't really solve problems with the same kind of thinking that created the problems, right?
Right.
What's wrong with our species? I mean, do we ask that? We don't ask that. We assume that we can think our way out of things. Some people think of technological solutions like fantasies like CO2 capture and whatever, and my strong feeling is that we're missing something that we haven't yet evolved. And it has to do with our capacity for emotional intelligence. We've developed sort of singularly along a Cartesian route, which has gotten us into a shitload of trouble. Because without, and if you read things like eco-dharma and stuff like that, they'll talk about what's missing is the feminine. Some of them talk about Buddhism, mindfulness and stuff like that. And I think what's missing from our intelligence is empathy. A real empathy with ourselves. It begins kind of with ourselves. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of meditation practices go through tremendous gymnastics to get rid of the self. I'm at the other end of the scale. I'm saying, forget that nonsense. We are very fundamentally a self. So let's explore it emotionally. And what does that mean? How do you do that? A lot of meditation practices try to get rid of the voices in your head. Well, so does brainwashing. Getting rid of the voices in your head may not be so smart. We're so smart. We are so smart. The hubris is evident in climate change, in global warming, which we've known about since, the 1800s, at least. At least we've known what happens. Despite everything we know, look at what our species does. Look what it spends its time on. Would you like a nuclear submarine? Fine, no problem. We got plenty of them. Would you like a war? Would you like 2,000 military bases? That's just our country. Something is missing. Something's wrong. And I'm really interested in exploring that. And even if it's one person at a time, I'm really interested in exploring that and providing some kind of way for other people to explore it, because it's really fun. It's really exciting to have a full emotional capacity, which none of us have. Each and every one of us is missing something, in my view. And so that's what I'm very interested in that as a last hurrah as I enter into my late 70s.
Well, I know it's hard to summarize in a few words, but it sounds like you're advocating like radical self-acceptance and self-love and self-understanding more, that we need, like, what does that look like? And it's mindfulness, and you're encouraging that kind of exploration, and just, leave us with a little bit more in terms of what you're recommending we look towards in that direction.
Well, that's kind of hard to really summarize. It's not mindfulness, although mindfulness is a great way to slow down and pay attention. But a lot of mindfulness ignores emotions. It denigrates emotions. I've heard people say, emotions are anachronisms. They're archaeological remnants of some distant past that have nothing to do with us or whatever, you know. So it's hard for me to explain what I'm into. It derives in part from fundamentally in part from Heidegger. It's from philosophy. You know, in the early part of the 1900s, you had there was the Freudian, which is very Cartesian. In other words, Newtonian sort of models, you know, where people have their mind and it's this and this and this. And neurochemistry is the same. When people talk about, oh, it's dopamine or serotonin, I can't tell you how many experts would come into my medical marijuana practice and discuss and explain to me about how serotonin and this and that. And I would say to them, look, we can have about a 30-second conversation about that because that's all we really know about that stuff, but it doesn't matter. That stuff is irrelevant, actually. What's really relevant is your personal emotional experience in your life that has no temporal or spatial horizon, a complete freedom to inquire of yourself and feel what's going on in yourself. And I think, you know, this is a way towards individual evolution. It's in my view, it's an evolutionary imperative. And hopefully this kind of thing will spread, because if people continue along the lines of just being able to think the way we think, nothing's going to change. We'll just get more of the same. No matter how active we are or how much we, you know, this or that, something has to change. Something really has to change. Anyway, it's tricky stuff to really talk about quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm writing about it, you know, and exploring it. We are actually building what I might call a chamber on my property, which is complete. Yeah, you'll have to see it sometime. Completely secure and with a sense of security and freedom. It's soundproof and comfortable, and it's a place where you have complete freedom to explore yourself.
Very cool.
Emotionally.
Cool. Well, please.
Not therapeutically.
Emotionally.
Yeah, emotionally.
Cool. Well, please
So
keep me in touch with that when you have something written and something to share. That would be fantastic to explore and check out. And you were mentioning that when you moved here, are you still in the same house that you bought when you first moved here, and that you kind of bought it and a bunch of other activists moved in right there? So
yeah, we lived here for over a year. I can't remember how long, you know, straggled, but the four of us lived here for sure for a year.
Wow. Great. So
yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah. So you've definitely been a connector of the grassroots and a supporter of the grassroots for, I would say, a 50-year career at least, and it continues. So
I hope so. I hope it continues. Yeah.
Please. So do I. Please keep going with all your connecting. And I know, like, we didn't even talk about Siskiyou Land Trust, and that's something you're involved with as well with Greg King. And there's a lot of work that you're doing there, and that's been going for a long time. So just
and it's been great help to work with trees. You've been very helpful in my efforts, you know. So we all work together.
Great. Yeah, this is so cool. I mean, I met you and years ago, and it's been a while since I've actually gotten to see you in person. So this is, I guess, the next best thing is chatting and catching up live on YouTube and Facebook. And I think it's important because it's got, you know, we got to open the circle, get everyone involved, and it's an invitation for everyone to come to the table and chat and share their ideas. And you are definitely a great person to listen to and hear everything that you've done and everything you're still doing. So I really appreciate you hopping on today and doing this Tree Lounge live with me. Yeah.
Really good. Really good.
Awesome. Well, be well and keep up the great work, Ken. I really admire all the work you're doing. It's been fun.
Yeah. Well, I admire what you do and what we're all trying to do. So
okay. And hey, we will see you at the 30th anniversary celebration of Trees Foundation when it's safe to gather, which we're hoping things get a bit better this spring. So if you want to say any last remarks about that, like, please, let's all get vaccinated if we can. If I mean, some people are intimidated by the process, or they're concerned maybe that it won't be good for them to get vaccinated. I mean, have you had conversations with people about this personally?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Greg King in particular, he was quite ill for a while, and some of my friends are compromised. But, I grew up when polio was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I was one of the early recipients of the Salk vaccine before Sabin vaccine came in. And I can tell you that it changes everybody's life to not have to worry about being taken down at a moment's notice, and everything changes. Vaccines are lifesavers, and it's very important because viruses like to use unvaccinated people as petri dishes, and viruses are very smart. They're very clever, and they change, and they can avoid these vaccines after a while. And so if there's too many unvaccinated, we'll be in real trouble, because those viruses will figure out how to avoid the vaccines. So while we have them, it's it's a miracle to have these. I just heard that they're coming out with vaccines against malaria and tuberculosis too. Same messenger RNA stuff. And people say it's experimental, and I say, well, actually, it's been worked on for 30 years. And something like 300 million people have had it already. And so the experiment, if you want to call it an experiment, it's working really, really well.
So so it's really imperative to get the vaccine and just get through it, and it's going to help stop this thing.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. Some people say, they'll find one person who's had a bad adverse reaction. Well, yeah, all vaccines, if you give enough of them, you will get a bad reaction. Some people get polio from the Sabin vaccine. Some people get what's called Guillain-Barré, which is an ascending paralysis, which I've seen in the ER from vaccines. These things happen, but they're like 1 in 10 million. They forget the other 9 million who are protected. And so it's really, I think it's not only a personal, but a cultural obligation to do. Very, very important to get vaccinated. And if you can't get vaccinated, stay away, stay isolated, and just stay away.
Yeah.
And some people, they have all these arguments. Talk to the nurses. Talk to the hospital staff. I was in the ER during AIDS, during the HIV. And I can tell you what that's like. You get somebody who's got a gunshot wound and they've got a fatal disease, and you're sitting there working on them, and they're all bloody and whatever. And that's what's going on right now for the nursing staff and the hospital staff. It's devastating. It's gruesome. And then to see all these people dying, and young people, and we really have an obligation to our whole society.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. I think it's important to keep saying, and I just really hoping for better outcomes, and that we get through this year, because it's
a lot
been.
of this, a lot of this was engineered by Trump as a divisive maneuver to divide the culture. That's the whole point of a lot of this. Because if there's no real other point to any of what they say. So that's the real point. It's a culture, it's a political maneuvering. So don't buy into it.
Don't buy into it.
Protect
Get
yourself and
vaccinated.
protect all of us.
Protect the community. All right. Well, thanks so much, Ken. We should wrap it up. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And even if you're watching the replay, please say hello. Let us know you're here. We're all community. So let's keep getting together in ways that we can right now. Extremely interesting. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Someone's watching right now. I can't quite see who it is, but I appreciate everyone for tuning in. And Ken, have a great rest of your weekend. Sounds like it'll be quiet.
Listen to K-Mud. Listen to K-Mud. Support K-Mud.
Right on.
All right.
All right.
Bye, Kerry.
Bye.